Hi, everyone. Welcome. Carl Steinbeck here. Thought we'd talk tonight about that very important issue about this extortion plot theory that's alleged in the Adelson murder cases. We had it already in the Charlie Adelson case where he said he was extorted for $333,000 on an extended payment plan. He paid around $133,000 the first day of the extortion. And thereafter, he made subsequent payments over extended period of time, a long-term payment plan to these supposed extorters, who initially said he thought Katie was also a victim, but later on he said he realized that she was probably in on it as well. And so something that really didn't play out in the trial as much was, what about that? What about the issue of this extortion, and how would a reasonable, highly educated person that surrounded himself with extremely smart people, very wealthy people. Keep in mind that the Adelsons had around $8 million in their accounts at this time. And collectively, they had so many smart people at their disposal, from lawyers to police officers, that they could have reached out to and said, how do we handle this? Obviously, this is the most critical legal issue the family's ever faced. They were highly litigious, keep in mind. And yet, the most important thing, where it's actually involving a life and death matter, allegedly, from what Charlie said. And we never heard that they reached out to anybody. We never heard that when this supposed extortion plot went down, the evening when Dan Markel was gunned down in his garage, that's supposedly when Charlie says it once went down. When Katie came over there later that night, around 10 or 11 o'clock, that's when she laid it on him and said that she knew the guys behind it. Now they're extorting Charlie because he had made the joke about it's cheaper to hire a hitman than buy a TV for his sister as a divorce present, his sister, Wendi Adelson. So if you look at that and what a reasonable person would have done, if you're in Charlie's shoes, a reasonable person in Charlie's shoes, first of all, would have just laughed it off when Katie told him that. Unless she had some kind of knowledge and it wasn't on the news, she would have no credibility whatsoever. Even if she did have it on the news, then there would be like a complete, he would just laugh it off, right? And then she'd have to keep telling him and warning him and whatnot. But that's not what Charlie said. He gave a really short description of how it happened, and there wasn't really much details brought out in cross-examination. So I thought it'd be a good time now to maybe go through that, the kind of things that never got brought out at trial, that just shows what a farcical defense this is. And so what would a reasonable person in Charlie's shoes do? And so, like I say, if you initially scoffed at it, laughed at it, yeah, right, Katie, that kind of thing is what you'd expect from a guy like Charlie. And most reasonable people will do the same thing. But if she kept, how long would it take her to convince him it was serious? And this would have gone on for quite a while. And we never heard about that. And then at the point he actually believes it, he would have said, like, well, wait a minute. He would have gotten mad about it. He would have said, prove it to me, or something like that. How do I know you're not just making this up to extort money out of me? So there've been all these follow-up questions and a really lengthy, long dialogue. Could have lasted for hours, let's say. And we heard none of that. It was just sort of like Charlie made out to be like, oh, hey, these guys are wanting $333,000. Are they going to kill you and your family? So hand it over. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, here you go. Let me go see what I can muster up. And so it was just so just incredible and just so unbelievable. And so I thought that right there alone is enough to find out that if you're on the jury, you're going to see right through it and go, this guy's completely lying. And what does make the most sense, if you have a payment plan, you have a payment plan because of the fact you don't want the hitman to be revealed by their extravagant purchases that they're the ones that got hired to do the hit. And keep in mind, Katie was the first degree of separation from Charlie. So she would have had to maintain the biggest low profile. She would have been lower than Luis Rivera and Sigfredo, but they also didn't get that extravagant in what they bought. They did buy a number of items, whether it's a motorcycle or whatnot. But the bottom line is they had to maintain this low profile for Katie in case it ever did the investigation steered south and they started looking at the Adelsons. So going back and looking at this issue with Charlie, how he would have responded, he would have wanted to know who this threat is, if he even believed it was serious, if it got to that point. And if Katie said she was afraid to tell him and she couldn't tell him and she really acted scared, then what do you think Charlie's going to do? He's going to call the police. He's going to call the police and he's tell them, look, I know, or at least from my girlfriend here, she knows who killed Professor Dan Markell earlier today, or at least he was didn't have many hours left to live at that point because he died approximately 1:30 in the morning. And so a couple hours beforehand, he's being supposedly extorted. Well, if this extortion threat was real, he would have just wound up getting the information from Katie, who told you this, who's threatening you, and he would have said, I'll take care of it. Think about how he talked about on the Dolce Vita tape. He talked about going full Nazi mode over a $5,000 bump that was done on his mom, Donna. So over $5,000, he's ready to go full Nazi mode. And keep in mind, he talked about Katie. If it comes to it, we need to kill this guy. So over $5,000, you're going to kill a guy when you've been paying, we don't know the exact amount up to that point, around April 2016, when the bump happened. But let's just say it was $200,000 at that point. It went from 133 the morning after the threat occurred, the supposed threat, and then he paid 133 in moldy cash at that time to Katie, put it in her trunk. And let's just say he paid her the rest of what was $200,000 as of 2016. At that point, he's got $200,000 that he's invested in this, and no reasonable person would sit there and not get the police involved. Because keep in mind, he's also basically proven himself to be a real gullible person, and he's going to be on the hook for life. I mean, why would they ever stop it? If you're getting $333,000 on a payment plan, why would you ever allow that payment plan to stop? Keep in mind, Charlie said how much he loved handling cash and saving cash for many years. So he always had cash at his disposal, but he supposedly didn't have it. He told Katie he didn't have any cash at his disposal. Why would he tell Katie he didn't have any cash at his disposal in his safe? I believe the most reasonable explanation is that he kept the money away from Katie because Katie had a job to do, and he did not want her ever getting back to Sigfredo that he had all this cash in his safe, because otherwise they would have showed up in mass and guns and demanded him turn it over one night. So he had to make sure he had no reasonable cash, accessible cash in the house. And that's why I believe it makes most sense that Harvey and Donna had that money stashed at their place so that he could not be held up at gunpoint. So they would have to go through and actually commit the murder before they're going to get paid for it. And then let's just think about how the police would have responded to this then. The police would have responded to this with a show of force. They could have had Katie wear a wire. They would have gone in there and waited for her to hand the money over. The guys would have been there, and they knew they would know then that these are the murder extortionists of Dan Markell, and they pretty much could have had their case solved within 24 hours if the Adelsons weren't involved. That's how simple it was. And yet Charlie's defense that he maintains at this trial is that he kept quiet about the extortion this whole time. The only people he told was his mom shortly after this extortion went down and the murder went down. And then he waited till in the Matsuri tape, the Matsuri restaurant where he's talking to his dad, Harvey, and he said he whispered it to his dad, Harvey. Yet there's no conversation at all that indicates that Harvey was surprised by any of this. He never raised his voice. There's not enough time even in the description of what was said. And they got spooked by the guy holding the camera bag, the undercover FBI agent. So they would have changed their topic altogether. And that's what it looks like they did. Otherwise, they would have had the perfect opportunity to again talk about the extortion attempt. So they missed discussing the extortion attempt when the bump occurred. And they had FBI wiretaps going on between the conversations between Charlie and Donna and also Katie. And yet they blew that by not mentioning anything about it. They talked in code. And then think about the Matsuri. They don't talk about the extortion attempt there. The meeting that Charlie had with his dad, Harvey. So all these opportunities, if the extortion really happened, that's something I would expect the prosecution to really hit home, because this is going to be a critical theme in the Donna Adelson trial coming up on September 30th of this year. And so they're going to have to rinse and repeat this of sorts and put some kind of spin on this thing to try to get a jury to buy in that Donna she just fell for this and was just trusting to do what her son told her to do. But keep in mind, when she called up the undercover agent posing as as a brother of one of the hitmen wanting money to support the brother that wasn't taken care of, like Sigfredo. What did Donna say? She said she reached out to like 10 or 12 of her friends to find out why would somebody be doing this to her when she had nothing to do with anything. So that is a critical piece. I think the prosecutions usually miss out on. They don't talk to friends, families, and neighbors of those that are prosecuting. And I think it's really critical, especially on a murder case. I thought it was good that they brought Ryan Fitzpatrick in for Charlie's case. That was his friend he had from way back when in the 2014 to 2016 timeframe, and some years beyond that before they had some kind of litigation spat. And so I think that all this kind of stuff just all indicates that everything, if you focus on everything the Adelsons have done is, from the prosecution standpoint, everything aligns with what guilty people would have done. None of it is what innocent people would do. And I think one of the real critical pieces that I don't recall seeing that brought out at trial at all is a reasonable person would have called the police. And think about the fact they had the most powerful judge in South Florida and probably all of Florida as Harvey's best friend and a godfather of sorts to Wendi. So you're telling me that Harvey never called up this judge and said, hey, we're being extorted? He's also got a son that practices criminal law that was initially Charlie's defense lawyer, who was also running for office. And this, keep in mind, this judge was also a state senator and majority leader for a number of years before he became a judge, or after. I forget which was the order, but in any event, he was that powerful and he had all those connections up at Tallahassee. And so none of that aligns with what a reasonable person would do if you had all these connections. It all indicates that they maintained this hunker down mentality. They didn't want to talk to the cops or lawyers because they didn't want to think that there was necessary to bring them in because they were obviously involved in this. So that's what makes sense. And it's very commonsensical and looking at this. So I think that now how quickly, you mean to tell me that the Adelsons couldn't figure out that if they reported this to police, that the killers of Dan Markel wouldn't have been arrested within hours of them getting back the next morning, and this money drop occurring from Katie? The agents would have been all over that. I mean, this has been such a opportunity for Charlie to basically prove himself the hero of solving the crime and having the quickness of foot to go ahead and call law enforcement. And even if, let's say, even if you want to give him this ridiculous story that he didn't trust the police, he surely would have trusted that judge and called the judge. The judge could have called the police and said, hey, the Adelsons are being extorted, and had his credibility behind it. And think about also the credibility that Charlie stated that he had when they have him on tape talking to Katie at Dulce Vita. He mentioned that if there's a gangbanger, a drug dealer dead in his driveway, and him as an oral surgeon, when the cops show up, they're not going to even question him because of his clout and standing in the community. So why would he go from having this like impeccable clout and standing in the community to all of a sudden worried about this, him saying a joke about Hitman's cheaper than our TV's cheaper than a Hitman? Why would that all of a sudden make him be afraid and think he has zero credibility with the police when he's got all these connections? And think also he had a couple of Fort Lauderdale police officers that did some dirty work for him. Charlie had a joint business venture with another individual, and he got these two cops to show up at the business and actually get this guy tossed out and evicted, essentially, when that's truly a civil matter. There was no judicial order or anything like that from what I saw in the police report. And if you don't have a judicial order to have someone evicted, you cannot evict them. The police do not get involved in that. It's a civil matter, and unless a judge orders some kind of eviction to take place, and they have law enforcement that would assist in that, there's no recourse that the cops would have gotten involved. So he had that kind of connection, and yet he never called them as well. I was thinking George would bring that up as well, that he's got these two cop friends and down there. So, but that never happened because they never got extorted. And that's the kind of thing I would think that the prosecution is going to counter with any kind of ridiculous story that they try to come up for Donna's defense. So the extortion never happened. It was a fiction of their imagination. It was a story that they decided to come up with if they ever got busted, but they never thought they were going to get busted. And so that's why they probably never told anybody. So if they would have told people earlier and they would have not talked on these wiretaps, then they would have had a more difficult time. They could have played this extortion defense. And think about it. Charlie didn't have a single person to come forward and say, yeah, I heard about the extortion issue, but way back in 2014, right after Professor Markell got murdered. It was never said. They never had a single witness because it was never spoken, and that's why. And so I think that you have also the issue of the other attorneys that have been on the case as well. Like, for example, this other Weinstein, the son of the judge, he was his first attorney. He never showed up to court and said, "Oh yeah, here's in my notes. I got proof that Charlie mentioned something about extortion," because it never happened. And Charlie would have not mentioned that to him. They wanted to keep it under wraps and whatnot. So the everything that they did, like I say, it's all indicative of a guilty party. Keep in mind also, we already talked about how Charlie's attorney contacted Sigfredo's attorney, the actual trigger puller that killed Professor Markell, to make sure that they were not talking. So instead of calling the police and reporting the crime and saying it was probably Sigfredo, Katie's lover and the father of her two children, is most likely the perpetrator of this. Instead, what does he do? He has his lawyer contact Sigfredo's lawyer and says that, "Oh, by the way, we're just making sure you're not talking, and Katie, you don't talk as well." So I mean, it's all the circle the wagons thing with all the co-conspirators. So that's why this thing is another great data point or a series of indicators that I think the prosecution could very well bring out in the next trial if they go into enough details. Because keep in mind, the devil's in the details, and that's how you counter bogus extortion theories and whatnot. So I look to have more of these kind of details and come out at this upcoming trial for Donna, as well as other Adelsons, because the more you dig in the details, the more it shows guilt. So with that, if you do have questions now, I do see some one here in red. If you can put red question marks, I don't know how you do that, but if you're able to put red question marks, those are the ones that are most easy to read for me and pick up. So I do read I do try to read the ones with red, and then if I think it's a good question for the group, I'll go ahead and post it up. Obviously, I won't be able to get to all your questions, but I'm trying to do the best I can. And some of them I do have to jump around, so I may not even see all of them, but I'm going to do my best here. Gene, the crime junkie says, "Oh, that I guess I thought that was a question. I'm sorry." But I'll just go ahead and say it here. You do believe Charlie told Ryan Patrick that you can get away with murder if you do keep your mouth shut? Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think they have some issues. Anybody that would go on these Vietnam tours with Charlie, I think would have some real serious character credibility issues in court. But I think that generally that kind of stuff is something you can see Charlie saying very well. So definitely. Watercolor Mama is asking, can you clarify whether the original murder plot became only a robbery by Garcia and Rivera? Did they take the money? Or the original murder plot became only a robbery by Garcia and Rivera? What do you mean only a robbery? I guess I'm not understanding your question. I mean, if they needed to rob them, they could have done that without killing him. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. They didn't do a stick up and ask for cash from Professor Markell. So did they take the money? Katie brought them the money. That's what Katie testified to. Tennis Girl's asking, what would be the first few lines of the opening statements if you were prosecuting Donna? I would I don't know if I want to get into that right now, but I'd have to get in the right mindset. So when I'm in court, I'm like a total different mindset. So right now I'm trying to be calm, and my my mind is a little bit more fragmented. I have attention deficit issues that I got to try to stay on a streamline. In court, I don't have that problem, thankfully, where my mouth can't keep up with my brain, because my brain is actually, I've rehearsed everything in my mind. I don't have anything scripted out. I don't even have an opening statement written out. It's all speaking straight from the heart. And what I usually do is take things sequentially in order of how the murder happened. And the opening statement is supposed to be that, a statement, not an argument. So usually the best thing I do is walk the jury through the evidence as how it's going to unfold, and but also make some explanations of how the family was all behind it and whatnot, and how Donna was a key player in all this as well. So I'm not going to give you a mock one here, but yeah, thanks for your question. Mr. C is saying, what is the interest on this layaway plan? And well, that was the thing. There was no interest. So from what it sounded like at trial, that basically you just had to pay the $333,000 and $333 apparently. And I don't recall exactly how much of that he said he paid out. So if any of you recall that, then go ahead and jump in and say that. I think at that point, the reason I don't recall it is because his testimony is so ridiculous. I wound up doing my live stream and then just basically turning off the volume. My nephew Ben wound up turning the volume off, and I was just like saying how insulting this defense theory was. It was the absolute worst defense theory I've ever seen. It was so insulting the intelligence of anybody. It was an absolute loser of a case. As I said, if you go back to my earlier videos that Brother John and I did, I mean, we said that this guy is a slam dunk murder convict. There's no chance he has for being able to bamboozle a jury. And normally the way defense attorneys are able to trick the jury is they confuse them. They confuse the jury on the issues. They get the facts twisted around, and they hope the jury buys into that, at least some of them, to be able to get a hung jury. So Gregoria is asking regarding Wendy's prosecution, was it beneficial that there was a Katie retrial for more lies under oath? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think if you take out the second trial for Katie, I don't think that really matters. I think she keeps getting worse as a witness as time goes on, but all you need is one time for Wendy to take the stand. And the way I look at it is, if I know a witness is lying on the stand, I just look at them. I think it's very important to be able to, first of all, you're looking down at them. You're not sitting down and looking up at them. I know, like in some states, you have to sit down and look up at the witness box, and the witness is looking down at you. So I think it's important to look down at the witness, and I just stay on focus with them. I don't take my eyes off them, and I'm just zeroing in on what they say. And it's basically a form of control also, because they know that I know their testimony better than they do, and it really makes them squirm. And if I just zero in with my eyes and my voice, and I let them know the way my tone of voice is, that they're getting really ridiculous in their story, and I know that they're lying, and you can really tell in their body language, they start really squirming and stuttering and stammering kind of stuff. And some people really get mad and angry. And I mean, it works really good to, I think, is a cross-examination technique to expose folks that are lying. So, but everybody has their own, cross-examination techniques. And I think that, you really didn't need to even cross-examine Charlie. He was such a hot mess and not credible whatsoever. So his story was just so far out in outer space. Shirley Lewis is saying, I don't think Charlie paid all the money on his own. I think Harvey and Donna paid half. Yeah, I don't know exactly how much they paid, but I think that this was all a combination that they all pitched in kind of thing. So I don't know that they'll ever have the money trail per se locked in, and because they dealt with a lot of cash, and they probably withdrew money from Donna and Harvey's account over time beforehand. But think about it. They had the June attempt early in June, the 4th through the 6th window of June, when the murder was initially supposed to go down, and it didn't happen. They flubbed it up. So I think that was, they had the money around at that time. But like I said, I think that's why they brought it back to the high rise for Donna and Harvey, because they didn't want a chance of Charlie getting stuck up by the hitman. because as it's turned out, we have heard through jailhouse informants that there was a previous hit where Charlie lost $50,000 because they took the money and ran and never went and followed through on the plan to kill Professor Markel. Teresa is saying, do I think prosecutors will reach out to Donna's friends to see if she really took a pull after the bomb? I mean, I would, that's something I would do, is like find out what their story is, what they've said. And then you got sort of the whole composite picture of what this person's been saying to whom and when and where. And then what I find invariably is you got major contradictions in what they're telling folks, their close friends and family members. And what you have then is, an opportunity to show again that they can't keep a story straight, and it helps show that that person's lying. Side Barbie's saying the Adelsons would never want it to be under criminal investigation for 7 years. They would have called the cops. Yeah, I mean that's just so rich people call the police. They don't sit there and say, well, we don't trust the police. We don't think they can protect us. I mean, they have $8 million to hire security guards or off-duty cops. I mean, and they wouldn't have waited for off-duty cops to become available for private security. They would have gone after them viciously to make sure they're arrested and that they don't have any kind of extortion. And so, acting like you're this innocent, helpless puppy dog with all those millions at your disposal to defend yourself and all your political connections, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Dana D'Angelo is asking, do I think Charlie tried to get Ryan to do it in 2013? Yeah, I mean, that could be a possibility, but I don't think it's the ones that supposedly took the $50,000. I don't think Ryan is a murderer type of guy, so I don't see him doing it. And so I think Charlie realized he has to use some people that are desperate and willing to kill. So I doubt he asked him, and I thought he thought he's going to go for other folks that do already have a criminal record. Because think about it, the more of a criminal record you have, the easier it is to discredit them if they do turn on you and try to flip and become a witness against you. That's what I've seen in my career of thousands of criminal cases, is that folks that utilize and exploit others, they always go after the ones that have the most character issues, because those are the ones that are going to be, it's almost like they know if it goes south on them, they'll have the easiest time to discredit their version versus the one pulling the shots, calling the strings. MZ's asking, do I think this case got so much popularity because we see an upper middle class Jewish American family facing some kind of consequence for their actions? I don't think this is a Jewish issue at all. I think it's an issue of the outrage that this case has lingered on, and there's not been justice for Markel's. And the boys in particular still are not getting to see on a regular basis to have unfettered access to their family in Canada. It's been piecemealed here and there, and usually tends to coincide with litigation or the Markel Act that allows civil suits if there's a murder in the family and visitation is denied to the surviving family members. So it didn't technically really apply to this case per se, but it gave them some leverage to try to force visitation. And also before court appearances of Wendi, then all of a sudden she'd let the Markels see the boys, but it's very brief in time, and they were hovering over them to the extreme to make sure that they could probably reach there to cover up the boys' mouths if they ever dared say something. But I'm telling you, from what I've seen about the kind of brainwashing that goes on, they would have never dared said anything, because they've been so programmed to never bring up anything about what is said that about their dad in that house. So anyway, that kind of paranoia also reeks of guilt. So, and someday the boys will look back at that and hopefully realize that. So that's why my mom, and that's why grandma and grandpa were so hovering over us all the time, and we wanted to see the Markel grandparents. Riley H is saying, isn't it bizarre that someone would be extorted for exactly $333,033? Yeah, I mean that's just shows that they didn't. This thing's not the way reasonable people would act, and so you would round it up. Criminals round it up. They don't fix it. They're not fixated on this. Well, he was supposed to pay a third of the murder plot, and so basically that's what we're going to try to extort him for. I mean, it's just so far-fetched and ridiculous. I actually thought of that earlier today. It's like, because it's sort of tougher to say as well. 333,000 and $333. I mean, that's a long jumble to say. Why don't they say 350K? Why don't they say 300K? I mean, that's what criminals do. They don't get into this numerics detail because they're trying to keep it simple as well. So that is another clue that it's a farce. Hey, Miller's asking if I know how the living conditions are for Charlie in prison these days. I think the last I heard was maybe a week or two. I heard that he was somewhat getting along with the cops that are in his Bay Area. Keep in mind he's in Open Bay, and maybe attending some classes or something like that. So I think he's sort of getting into somewhat of a routine there. But keep in mind he's in Open Bay, and he doesn't have protection of his own cell at night, and they pretty much have lights on all the time. So it's not a good place to sleep. It's going to be very loud, and it's going to be very nerve wracking as well. At any point, you could have one of those guys be a former Latin King member, or somebody that's connected through the Latin Kings, or maybe if if Latin King hears there's a transfer of somebody going there, maybe they'll offer money or protection or something to do something to Charlie. So I would say he's not totally out of the woods yet on any kind of extortion or threats of bodily violence. For Donna's trial, I do hope I can make the very end of it, at least for the closing arguments, like I did for Charlie's. I know John's going to be there. He's going to try to be there for the whole duration of it, at least after the jury selection occurs, and before it, if possible, as well. T.S. Jackson is asking if Donna will take the stand. She pretty much has to put any kind of this ridiculous defense story up there. Just like I said the same about Charlie. I mean, we don't know what his defense is, but he has to take the stand. And if you think about it, none of those witnesses we saw on the witness list would be the type of people that really could say much about him. And he had bad character evidence out there, so nobody could come in and say Charlie had good character. And if they try bringing in good character witnesses for Donna, they could bring up her nasty emails and all that kind of stuff. So I don't see that really happening as well. So he doesn't have a lot to work with again. Lisa Simone is asking, if I've ever known a defense lawyer that knew the client was guilty and purposely failed the case, like in the movie Injustice for All. A lawyer that intentionally, purposely failed the case. I can't think of any time that I've seen that. So do not believe that any attorney would do that. I've seen an attorney fall asleep. I've seen that happen before. I don't think that was intentional. I think the lawyer just really didn't have much interest in the client, didn't really put a lot of preparation in the case. And he was co-counsel to me, so I wound up doing the whole case. He just sat there and sort of fell asleep. Okay, what defense theory would I use? It says Pa. Well, I'm not going to help the defense. I'm not going to come up with a defense. Are you asking what I would use? Well, I would not. I would not go to trial in a case like this. It's a slam dunk loser of a case. She's going to go down, and why waste your time on propping up a bunch of lies like this that are not going to help anything? And then again, you don't have much advantage, because if you try to cut a deal, there's no kind of deal that you're gonna get and extract out of this that's going to be something that Donna would agree to. It's not like she's 20 years old, maybe, and she's going to get a 40-year sentence and have some daylight to end of her normal life to get her normal life back. So she has no chance of getting her normal life back. So I think Donna is adjusting somewhat well at right now, but keep in mind she's used to very good nutrition, very good health. She is able to exercise there in the jail by walking around on a track, as I understand. But with that poor food that they give you there, even if it's even if she's not hungry, let's say, it's not going to be the nutritious stuff she's used to having. So, and she probably doesn't have the vitamins and all the other stuff she's used to. So I do think that that's probably something that's going to make it harder for her to stick it out. MZ's asking if Donna and Dan have discussed case strategies that involve throwing Charlie under the bus. To what degree, and has this occurred in the opposite direction, Dan and Charlie? Well, no, Dan cannot discuss with Donna any efforts to throw Charlie under the bus, because that would be a conflict of interest per se. And if he discussed that, he's basically throwing Charlie under the bus, even though Charlie is his former client. Rolling over on a former client who has an appeal pending is an absolute disaster. As a lawyer, you cannot do that. He would have to step away. If Donna mentions, hey, what do you think about rolling over on Charlie to get me a better deal? He could not even discuss that with her. So at that point, he would have to resign himself from the case and have to be new counsel. So yeah, that's a convoluted mess that Dan Rashomon got himself in. And I was just really surprised that the judge didn't go into more of an inquiry on what Don is actually signing up for here. She just answered a series of yes questions. Yeses are answer to the questions on constitutional conflict counsel and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I suspect it was just a list of questions that was submitted to the judge by Rashbaum. And, even the prosecution wasn't involved in that. And I would have, as a prosecutor, I would have stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, we need to make sure she fully understands what this is, Judge. We need to make sure she understands maybe scenario-based type questions and see how she responds to that. Because what does it mean in her mind? If she says yes to all these questions, I mean, that's very complex stuff, conflict-free counsel. Most people don't understand all the nuances and the complexities of it. And keep in mind, it's a constitutional issue. It's not just a statutory issue or an ethics issue for attorneys. It's an actual constitutional issue that's been decided by the Supreme Court on cases. So it's that important of an issue to get ironed out. So I'm surprised that that any attorney would go from one case like that to the next, from Charlie to Donna. Yeah, I just thought about this. So if you consider the fact that this defense was so outrageous, ridiculous, nonsensical, and is about the weakest, most pathetic defense theory you could come up with, then it also sort of lends itself to thinking why they thought they could get away with this, right? Because trying to murder somebody from the Miami area to a professor in broad daylight in his garage. And is anybody really that delusional think they could get away with that? So I think they've been delusional this whole time. There's just no way they could have gotten away with this, and they should have gotten busted right away. And that's why people are so outrageous, because Adelsons are not locked up, and it's because of their connections that they had is the most compelling reason. And then we got rid of that prosecutor at the chief position there, at the state attorney position, that was subsequently replaced in 2016 election. And That was with the current one. So the current one's been there and he's been given the green light for these cases. But why they're doing it one at a time and wait until one Adelson gets convicted for the next is really, I think, not the right recourse to take if it was a case of mine in Texas, for example. So Richard Gonzalez is asking, does the judge have discretion to deny Donna's right to hire the same lawyer as Charlie? Well, it's a real touchy issue. Like I say, you have a constitutional right to have the counsel of your choice, but if the counsel of your choice is so conflicted and whatnot, ultimately the judge has to at least make sure that the defendant is aware of what those conflicts are, right? So if the client or the defendant does not fully appreciate the conflict and how it could hinder them, so and hinder the discussion. So I mean that judge didn't do an inquiry. Do you understand you cannot, if you wanted to roll over on Charlie, that he could not even discuss that with you? I mean, how do we know Donna knows that? She doesn't know that. Um, she probably doesn't know that, let's say. And so that was not brought out through any questioning either by the judge or the prosecution. So it was just like this scripted yes, 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 yes type of thing. And to me, that's meaningless because for a lot of conflicts, you need to have voluntarily, knowingly, and intelligently. So how do we know she intelligently knows what she signed up for by having Rashbaum? So I would say none of those were met at that hearing. But I don't think it's going to be an issue in the end because ultimately it's I don't think she ever would roll over on Charlie. Yeah, no all caps, please, to try to jump ahead. Thank you, Roxanne. Martha Duncan is saying Adelson seem to prefer hiring a lawyer that they know and can control and who actually likes them as opposed to a lawyer that will do the job and tell them the truth. Weird. Yeah, that's what a lot of wealthy clients want is to having a lawyer that agrees with what they want to do. And if they don't, then they get fired. So that's sort of what you got to do as a lawyer if you want to maintain the high paying client sending the payments in, the retainer in every month or a lump sum, whatever it is. That's what I see happening in high profile cases with wealthy people. Intolerant is saying, what could possibly trigger a Wendi arrest before Donna's trial? I just don't see that happening based on that they're doing this one at a time. And, if they got such overwhelming information from the digital review, that's the only thing that would, I think, change it. But even then, I think they're just doing this one at a time. I think they don't have the kind of mindset you need to go after multiple defendants on a murder case at one time. So I just don't get it. I don't get it. It's not something I would ever advocate. They are getting convictions, but it's so slow and drawn out. It's just really, really, really painful to sit there and watch and tolerate all this and think about all the times and trips that the poor Markells have to make from Canada down here to attend all these lengthy trials. I mean, it's really taxing on them, no doubt. I don't know anything about whether the Geek Squad guy has died. I have no idea. I've never heard that before from B. Allen. I don't know where you heard that. But that's the thing also. I mean, the longer you drag this stuff out, what if a critical witness like Jeff Lacasse isn't available? And for whatever reason, not even maybe, something that he could control. I mean, he's a great witness and is willing to testify, I'm sure, in any however many more trials they got. But I mean, gosh, at some point it's like that this time factor of all these critical witnesses. Michael Meehan is saying when Charlie said on the telephone call regarding Wendi driving to the crime scene, she just couldn't help herself. This is only said when they both understand beforehand that it was bad. Okay, well, he was talking to his mom and he was complaining to his mom, and I think he was really upset about it. I don't think he realized the significance of that and the way Georgia hit on that at trial and also in the closing. I think he really is looking for other people to blame, and I think that's one of the things because he's probably thinking back to what his friend said about that 1 in a million comment or 1 in 10,000. He had not somebody else saying 1 in 10,000. So I think he was playing back like, what could have gone wrong? It's surely not my testimony and credibility on the witness stand. So I think he was just looking for somebody to point the finger at. And it is very damning. It is very true what he says. If the odds of Wendi going by there just over an hour after the murder happened, and you're going to go way out of your way, 40 minutes out of the way, and that's just a coincidence. Well, sorry, that most jurors are not going to believe that. I would say virtually zero will. And then you add all the other evidence you have. Watercolor Mama is asking, is it possible Adelson's money was stashed away before the rest is being used to help the Garcia children? Is Katie keeping quiet because Adelsons are funding their kids while in the prison? I mean, something like that could be going on. It's just really bizarre behavior. I mean, Sigfredo not to roll over, him thinking he can go to trial, Katie doing multiple trials and getting convicted, and then not really coming clean well, and just having a lot of bizarre actions by her. I just think it's really, this case has so many twists and turns on so many levels. You will never find a more detailed case where you have to get into so many minutia details to understand. But if you spend the time to dig into that minutia, it actually helps paint the picture, the mosaic, and it shows basically the puzzle pieces to show how the Adelsons were behind it. So from that sense, it's not too complex. You just got to have a capacity to really digest all these things and put all of them together. Hi, Carol from Melbourne. One of our top 6 viewing areas. When will I continue the Wendi Adelson indicators of involvement list? Yeah, I need to do that soon. I was talking to somebody about it this past week, so I'm going to get started on that. I think I'll do 5 at a time. And so that'll be coming up pretty soon here. Still probably a few weeks out. It may be more into end of March, early April. Rick Rodriguez asking if the life insurance money you received will be demanded back since her family was involved. Well, the life insurance policies actually did not go directly to Wendi, but it went to support the boys. So it was more of an indirect payment to Wendi. So therefore, I don't think it's anything recoverable as any kind of like insurance fraud per se. So it's once you give it to Adelsons, it's up to what they want to do. So I think there's that layer of protection where nobody has to pay it back. But Linda Kay is saying, aren't witnesses supposed to address the questioner instead of speaking directly to the jury? To me, the jury is supposed to be the observers of the exchange instead of participants. I think it all depends on what the preference of the attorney is and what they tell the witness to do. I think it's okay to have the witness look at the jury once in a while for like really emphatic points they're trying to make. I think if they have it where every question they do a robotic left turn, look at the jury, and then look after they answer, then look back. I think that's very, very much non-credible. I think that comes across as more too rehearsed and whatnot. So I don't think that's a good thing. But I think once in a while a juror making that point when they have a key point to make. What I do to make sure that the jury doesn't hold it against a witness is I tell the witness to, as I ask you questions, if you feel like there's an important point to make to the jury, please go ahead and look at them and look to your left and look at them face to face so they can read your demeanor. I'll say something like that to that effect. And that way the witness doesn't look like they're trying to be some kind of slickster. Yep. Don't want to hit that button again because I'll black out the screen here and lose you. SP 74 is asking, can you imagine a scenario where the state will need to try Wendi for perjury to undo her use immunity, or she testified to nothing and can't get elsewhere? Well, she's not incriminated any of the Adelsons. If anything, it's just more the fact that her lies are coming out. So she's not said anything to like sink Charlie. She's not saying anything directly that she feels like she's sinking Katie. So she's actually been, come across as a terrible witness. So, and with all the lies that the prosecution can bring out, I would expect them to bring perjury charges because that's the only way you can get in our previous statements given in court under immunity. So hopefully they'll do that. But that's like an aggressive move by a prosecutor. And I don't know if they're that aggressive to do something like that. But I do think every time she changes her story, and if you had a videotape of how she came across, and then you compared it to how she would be in her own case, for example, I think it would be pretty damning, and I think it's a great strategy that most prosecutors would use. Beyond is asking if we'll ever see Danny's girlfriend on the stand for Donna or Wendy's trials. She was on the witness list, so I don't know if that's going to be the case. I'd rather have some other folks testify, like the different connections for the Adelsons, to talk about how they acted. I'd rather have Robert Adelson, the oldest son, testify to how strange the other Adelsons were acting after the murder and how he wound up having to drop contact with them. I think that's so damning of evidence to bring out. So Miranda, I agree with you. Laughable defense. Sherry Brown is asking, what do you think Charlie thought about Wendi not asking about him? Well, he flipped because he's mad. Well, Donna tried to deflect that, so I don't know if he's going to go back and try to find that out. But that would, if he knew about that, you're not asking that would make him mad. I don't know if it's going to make him mad enough to try to flip on her, because that would make mom mad. But if Wendi outlives Donna, then I would say definitely he's going to be really, that to be the time he's really going to be motivated to become state's evidence against Wendi. Clarissa H is saying, so Charlie, who would never date a single mom, gets in a relationship with Katie. I think he chose her purposely. Yeah, because she said she would know somebody that can put the hurt on somebody. That's the only reason he dated her. I think that was the whole key. He looked at her as somebody that probably has some rough character contacts in her background, and it's worth a couple weeks dating her. And then if she says no to that question, then dump her. Ridden Shotgun is saying it makes no sense. If he's worth millions, why not pay off the extortionists rather than a payment plan? Well, I mean, you could do that, but rich people are not going to pay an extortionist. Trust me, they don't do that. And most people with half a brain would not do what they did. They would call the police right away. And with all their connections, it's just so ridiculous. Kathy Prosser, I agree with you. You say the prosecution doesn't need Charlie to flip. They have enough for conviction. And how can anyone believe Charlie anymore? Anyway, I wouldn't. Yeah. Well, if you could come up with some kind of details, things to and receipts to show, then he could try to get his life sentence reduced. But yeah, I mean, I would say if he had something really good, then prosecutor might use it. But you don't have to even go back and say he's entitled to a reduced sentence. So we keep in mind this prosecution office that thought they didn't have enough evidence to go forward all these years, and look how that turned out. I mean, I think that we've really seen that they were wrong in their assessment. They didn't have the proper optics on how this evidence would come out at a jury trial. Yeah, Francis is saying it's a high interest case because they got away with it for 10 years, plus the name change factor is so repugnant to the public. Yeah, so the visitation issue, also the Holocaust survivors ring that Wendi never gave back. You bring those two things out, and then the lies about the unfettered access to the boys. Those three things, I'm telling you, they're going to be jurors will just go enraged that this thing took so long. They will be so mad. That's the number one thing. I think if you question the juror after Wendy's trial, they'd be going, "What in the world took her so long? It is unreal that the state has sat on this for so long and let her get away with all this. It's ridiculous. It's really outrageous. Really outrageous." Franklin Rizzo, what do you make of the PR efforts that are all over social media to viciously attack witnesses in this case? Well, that's a good question, Franklin, because it's really a sign of desperation. And I think that they are spending all this money to try to control the outcome of the case, to try to intimidate the prosecutors. Because think about it, this intimidation that they've done for years has worked, I think, in the terms of the prosecution was questioning their ability to try these cases. It made them string along, and maybe they were not really sure how they're going to decide these cases. But I think it's just a matter of it's a sign of desperation. They're trying to get people to say crazy stuff about different witnesses. And I struck a commenter recently that was making some outlandish comments and trying to say that other people involved in it and whatnot. So it's just so it's just so ridiculous, and it's just what desperate people do. I mean, I think if I had a innocent party on a high profile case, I'm not going to worry about it. I mean, the evidence is going to be there showing that they're not guilty. And so I think all this is just money spent to try to confuse the public, muddy the waters, and dispirit the prosecutors from taking a strong stance. And it's worked. I think it's worked to a large extent. I think these prosecutors were completely afraid to go after big city lawyers that could come in there and just they thought they'd probably clean their clock and embarrass them. But and look how it's worked out. In the end, they've embarrassed themselves because the evidence was that strong. So it's just mind boggling. Ms. Jim Morrison is asking, I watched your interview regarding the Jared Brightigan case, seeing how similar the case are. Why didn't the DA go after the Adelsons like that? Well, it's because of politics. They had so much connections to the political machines that bought them a lot of time, and so they had connections all the way from the Miami Fort Lauderdale area all the way up to the state capital area. So with that kind of ability to affect and influence the criminal justice system there, that's what got them all that time. Yeah, D'Angelo saying defense has social media bots trolling Jeff. I think you mean Jeff Lacasse, and I saw that as well. And for them to say he had some kind of conviction for some kind of domestic incident, I mean, that's just ludicrous. That would have came out at trial if that was the case. So there's no truth to that, obviously, in my mind. It's just a desperate effort to try to derail and rattle the prosecution, and the prosecution shouldn't even worry about that kind of stuff. KO Las Vegas asking for my opinion on Wendy saying Isom was told that the TV repairman, a complete stranger, the TV joke on the morning of the hit on Dan. Why would she say that? Yeah, she's trying to plant seeds. She was trying to plant seeds and have that guy be interviewed and mention that as well. So she had another reinforcement because in her mind, she's thinking, I wouldn't be saying this if I was involved. I probably think my family's going to be found out and discovered at some point. So I might as well plan a defense for me now. So she was already strategically throwing Charlie under the bus at that time and probably realized she could be doing it for her mom too. So that makes the most sense. Some rando saying what extortion would say $30 million. I mean, they don't talk like that. They would be 300, 350, something like that. Or why not just make it $1 million for that matter? I mean, they would have never ended this extortion racket. Okay. If they got to 300,000, why would they stop? If they could pin the murder on them, they would keep on doing this day in, day out, year after year after year. They would never be able to shut this off. And that's why I've said before, I think Katie, once that they got tired, Charlie got tired of constantly paying her, I think that he would have taken her out. I recall something about there was some kind of time that Charlie was asking her and Sigfredo to take a vacation out to Key West or something like that. I mean, maybe he had some other scenario where he envisioned taking them out as well, so they could not flip on him. So yeah, it's like when you're dealing with people that can kill, they could have came back and killed Charlie. They could have came back and killed Harvey and Donna. They could have killed Wendi. I mean, there's a lot of violence that could have had backblast potential against the Adelsons and potential robbery efforts as well. So I mean, you deal with that degree of depravity, and you can easily have some kind of backblast type occurrence. Despised Icon is asking what other cases have taken this long you remember in your career. I can't remember a case that's taken this long. I've never had a cold case murder case, but I mean, this is like a really, they're treating this like a cold case murder, like they never know who did it. That's what's so bizarre about it. Sioux City Sue. I wonder if you're from Iowa. What do we know about the child support for Roman on Florida? He didn't give her a house to live in. At least he doesn't need it anymore. Yeah, I mean they're selling the house. I think they're needing it to get money to pay for all these lawyers. Lisa Mana's asking if I think all criminals like to keep some sort of souvenir involving the crime. I don't know. I mean, I've not seen that before, but why would you want to keep, think about it. Why would you want to keep the Holocaust survivors' wedding ring? Well, I mean, that shows such an elevated level of creepiness. It's just, it's just really bizarre. The last thing you want to do is take a ring of a family member that's even while they're going through divorce. Why would you want to keep that? And if you did keep it after the person got murdered, definitely give it up. So yeah, it's just really a creep factor that's off the charts. Empty Pox is asking if I heard about Garcia stabbing someone in prison. Yeah, I heard about that. I don't remember any details. I didn't see any details about this. I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah, Carolyn A. Yeah, that's the other thing is he wanted to take Katie out for a boat ride. So Charlie, I forget the context. He was suggesting Katie go out for a boat ride. I think there's a good chance she would have had her 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 legs chained to some concrete and thrown overboard. That's my suspicious nature coming out. SB 74. Do I think none of the Adelsons knew of Rivera until Sigfredo's arrest? That's what I've been saying. That's why I think if you look at the Dolce Vita tape, he didn't know about a third wheel. Katie and Sigfredo on the third wheel, Luis Rivera, and having a brother. I think that's why it totally threw him off. And that's why Katie kept playing stupid because she didn't want to admit to him that she knew about Sigfredo getting a buddy to travel up there. It makes the most sense in how they acted. And that's why the Adelsons are so confused. Like, what? There's somebody else that knows about this? How would they know about this? And so, yeah, I just think it really threw a wrench into it. And I think it made them more likely to. The good thing about it is it made them more likely to talk and try to figure it out on the wiretap calls between Donna and Charlie. Maya Giordano is asking, don't I think if Wendi had honestly zero to do with Dan's murder, would she have sat with law enforcement and over cooperated, even told on family to stay out of prison for sons? Yeah, but if that was true, yes. But I think in this case, if you notice, she rather was throw him under the bus, but then also try to paddle and say like her mom sounded surprised to hear that Dan had gotten shot and all that kind of stuff. I mean, she was trying to tap dance around it, and she's playing both sides of the fence. So, but knowing what she would have been wanting to look at the evidence, she would have been wanting to. She would have seen that her brother was involved, and she would have like, yeah, become state's evidence and not resisted and hired a lawyer and all that kind of stuff. So totally. Yeah, I think there's nothing, like I say, there's nothing about any of their actions that are consistent with somebody that's innocent. It's all indicated with guilty behavior. Yeah, Jeff Lacoste, super credible. Dreamscape is saying the Adelson family said they're willing to pay as high as $1 million for Dan. Keep in mind that was for Dan Markel to relocate to Miami. If he agreed to do that, they give him $1 million, but they didn't have to go that high with a hitman. Probably why they never made it that offer to Danny. Yeah, I think that was true. Hiring a hitman was cheaper than the $1 million for sure. Carolyn is asking have you noticed that George is deconstructing the train the same way the train was built? In my estimation, Wendi would be last. Yeah, that could be the case. But there's stronger evidence against her than Harvey. I think they don't need to go after Harvey last. But if they want to use her to testify against Harvey, then I would say that could be the case. I just wish they'd arrest both of them at the same time. It's just really dragging this out for no good reason. Lambrelli's asking if I think Donna's going to get angry and do terrible on cross. I think she's going to do terrible on cross. I think she's not going to be likable at all. I'm telling you, likability of the defendant is so crucial in a case. Also, likability of a victim. And you have polar opposites here between the Markels and the Adelsons. And any of these Adelsons are going to come across as an absolute train wreck. Juries will absolutely despise what they have to say. They won't believe a single word they said. And it's going to work out good for the prosecution. It's going to work out good for for the Markells. All right, so Jim is from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Karen Altschwager saying Wendi needs to change the boys' names for their safety again after all their uncle turned against a Latin king in court. Yeah, that's so. That whole change in the name thing, that's just nothing but sheer hatred, unmitigated hatred. I think that's definitely one of the top things against Wendi and her trial, changing the name of the boys that way. Maya saying if Charlie would have had all his conversation on the boat, he may have saved his freedom. LOL. Yeah, it definitely made it harder. I think that the wiretap and all the other behavior that he did in his testimony alone would have did him in. If he would have gotten on the stand. Anyone to get on the stand like that and coming up with such a preposterous story would have been convicted, even if they didn't have the wiretap evidence. So, but yeah, that pretty much is why I said it was a guaranteed slam dunk win for the prosecution. The two is saying, I've always wanted to be on the jury, but when I tell them I was married for 25 years to a cop, I'm tossed out. Could I hold back now that I'm divorced, or would it cause issues post-trial? You never want to lie in the court, okay? Do not ever think that you don't need to disclose that. And so if you mislead the court like that, aggressive prosecution could charge you. Yeah, it could cause a mistrial and something like that. So you don't want to mislead or avoid telling the truth on a case just to try to sit on the jury. As a lawyer, I'll probably never sit on a jury. No attorney would want to have me on the case, and because I'd be worried about me picking one side or the other. And if I'm the prosecutor, probably wouldn't want me on necessarily if I'm an active defense lawyer, and the defense lawyer probably wouldn't want me on if I said I was on a podcast talking about the injustice to the Markells and how the prosecution and the defense were not doing what I thought was appropriate. So yeah, it's just just one of those deals. It's I've never gotten notified to even appear for jury duty. So I think it's one of the greatest exercises of your civic duty as a U.S. citizen, and I just never will get that chance. It looks like. Side Barbary saying lawyering up and refusing all interviews after the initial police contact is pretty damning. Wouldn't you want to find the person who killed your children's father? Yeah, that's another telling thing. The fact they lawyered up, you can't bring that out in Wendi's trial per se, but I would maybe use that for you could ask Wendi that when she's on the stand. What have you done to follow up and find out who the killer is? It's fair game if she's not the defendant. Kmart used to advertise layaway plans. They went bankrupt. Yeah. True Crime Wifey is asking who can be expected to see the stand terrifying in Donna's trial. Who new can expect to be we expect to see on the stand terrifying in Donna's trial? Who will be called again to testify? I think it's going to be all out of the same. And it's just going to be, I would hope that they're going to call a lot more folks in terms of like who they talk to and
neighbors and friends and stuff like that, and they'll have more digital evidence. There's going to be more testimony about that. So it might be some of the same witnesses talk about the digital evidence, but it may be different ones as well. Maybe different ones from the FBI forensic analysis team. But I think they got a good enough one there with Sergeant Corbett. He really knows his stuff. Oh, here. Sorry. Yeah, I've heard something about a stabbing in prison. I haven't heard anything more about Sergeant Garcia doing that stabbing. So yeah, Crystal Blue 22. That's a good point. Wendy said it wasn't her job to find the killers when questioned by George Kaplan. I mean, that is such a. If that was my client talking like that on a witness stand, I would be like, oh my gosh, that is such a cold statement to make. Extremely cold, heartless. All right, it doesn't have anything to do with their religious background, so I'm striking that comment. It has to do with the political connections and intimidation of high-priced lawyers. That's my belief on what happened, on why this case has taken so long. All right, MM is asking if Charlie's appeal goes through, will it be harder to convict on us? I assume you mean he gets reversed conviction. I think if he gets reversed, they'll just retry it. So I don't think it's going to matter for Donna. They're going to go march forward on Donna's regardless and just retry him and fix whatever was allegedly done improper. But I don't think there's anything that was done improper, so I don't see that happening. Have the Markells had the opportunity to see the boys lately? Sally's asking. I think that this time of year that they go to Florida to visit and stuff like that. So whether they see the boys or not, I can't say. Timothy Swire is asking how come there's so many high profile cases come out of Florida? Is it simply the cameras in the courtroom? No, I just think it's I don't know exactly why it hasn't be so much in Florida. It is better to cover if you can't have cameras in the courtroom, and it's one of the most populated states. And it's not like a lot of northern states in wintertime where people are hunkered down more than a third of the year because it's so cold and icy and snowy outside. So I think that may have something to do with it. Yeah, I hear the cats downstairs playing, but they haven't come up here. They're playing with some of their toys. They got a bunch of toys down there. Lila's asking, do I know Wendy's lawyer? No, I do not know him at all. I've not seen him. John has seen him down there because he was there when Wendi testified, but I have not seen him. I've also not seen him anything having to do with the Trump defense at all. So I don't know what's going on with that. Caroline's asking, what do I think Wendy's lawyer is concerned about with her lying so much during testimony? I mean, yeah, it's like she's any defense attorney knows she's just a disaster on the witness stand, and it keeps getting worse. She's just more and more coming across as not telling the truth, hating on the Markells. I could go on and on about the stuff the jury would have to say about her testimony. It's none of it's good for her. CLK is asking for Adelsons not calling the police when extorted demonstrates their state of mind and their ways of dealing with problems. Well, yeah, because there wasn't an extortion, right? So if if they were extorted, of course they would call the police. So that does indicate they're guilty. This because anybody, and there's no reasonable person with all the lawyer friends, all the connections they had to high profile politicians with all the connections they need to help prevent any kind of cops from treating them unfairly, that they had all that in the pocket. So yep, it's only because they were guilty and they wanted to circle the wagons and keep it hush hush. Teresa M is asking, do I think that an attorney is less effective in court when they have to keep referring to their notes when doing the opening or closing, or does it matter if the content is compelling? I just don't like the note approach. I may have, like, if it's a lot of stuff to remember, I may have a couple points written down, no more than 5 on maybe an index card, just there at the table. What I normally do is stand in front of the lectern, and then I don't really have to need my notes. I think what I found is that the more you have notes as doing a closing or opening, the more you're going to rely on the notes, unless you're going to be able to talk freely off the top of your head and from the heart. So I think in this case, the way they had that compelling graphic display of all the evidence that came out through the wiretaps and the texts and the emails, all that kind of stuff was rolled in such a beautiful presentation that I think in that case it came across really well. And so I'm also against like a whole list of questions on your direct and cross examination. I like having more direct engagement with the witness, and I just feel I have more of a commanding presence in the courtroom when the jury can see that I'm like know the facts. I mean, think about it. If my opponent is going through, their legal pad or whatever it is, and just writing down and checking off the box every single question, they're looking down, reading a question to the witness. I think it just takes away a whole lot from them coming across like they know their case, they're confident about the case, and they're ready to pounce on anybody that's not telling the truth. So I think it's a crutch. I don't like it. I would advocate that, any attorney not do that. If you have such a fire hose of information, fine, put it out there, put it on the screen and have it a big screen, and then sort of look at it. You can look it over your shoulder and then point out different things as you're giving your statement from the heart, or your closing argument from the heart. So in this particular case, I thought it was, nonetheless, there's so much information that I didn't have such an issue with Georgia looking at a lot of her notes, because there was a lot of stuff, and she was basically just, it corresponded very well to what was playing behind her over her shoulder on the big screen there for the jurors to see. So it was like it really came across great. I was really impressed. Yeah, they didn't call the police because it was all just fabricated, right? Bam Atlanta is asking if I think that the evidence of Wendi using the WhatsApp is out there. I would hope so. Hopefully they've done a search warrant for that back then and now. I just don't know. I think they might have missed the boat on that. And a lot of it doesn't happen. They don't retain that stuff for that long, maybe more than 2 years. Sioux City Sue is asking out, or saying I would ask how many times she's called the police station just to see any information. Yeah, you could ask that question. If she's not the defendant, you could ask that. Sure. Thanks, Em, for supporting the cause. Andy School is asking if the TV repairman or person who received the call for the appointment for the AM for TV, could be called if located. Could that be helpful to state if they said it was Donna on the phone? I don't think they may know the number to call, and that's why I think they called Donna. And so but I don't know if it was under Donna's account. So I don't know all the details of that, and it wasn't really clear from what they presented in court. So not sure, but if they could find that kind of stuff, yeah, that's definitely the kind of detail you want to bring out. But we do have the fact that Donna did notify Wendi that the Geek Squad guy was on the way to her house. So we do know that, and I think that's very damning that she would have that kind of knowledge. So it makes sense that she probably was most likely the one to make the appointment as well. Sarazona's asking, would Wendi consider fleeing right before Donna is convicted? Yeah, you would think so. You would think so. Oh, that reminds me, there was a question that came up today about whether Donna was surprised that she wouldn't be able to bond out of jail when she was there at the airport. And my belief is that the reason she took off for the airport to leave the country is because she knew she couldn't bond out on a murder case. Because if you know you can bond out on a murder case, wait to see if you get charged. And then you get charged, you make bail. And then when you're out on bail, then go ahead and make the decision to flee the country. Why would you surrender all that up front if you knew you could get bond out? Think about it. She doesn't have a criminal record. She's never been convicted of anything other than maybe a traffic ticket. So she would stand a good chance to make bond, let's say, in her mind, if it wasn't for the fact that in Florida, in a murder one case, your chances of making a bond are basically zero. And if she can't make bond, then the time to flee is before you find out if you're charged. So that's why I think she knew, and she didn't act surprised at all. She's had a little flippant attitude, right, when she was there getting arrested. So that's what really leads me to believe. And she also told me, my lawyer said I can keep this phone. And so she was very much in the know that this was her one chance of freedom, because if she got arrested, she's never going to see the light of day before trial. Dadians is saying, Wendi moved to Miami so fast. Any info on booking movers in advance of their crime? Yeah, I don't know if they thought of looking that far in advance. Think about it. They didn't have any really they didn't have any that type of thing. And maybe they decided to do it. Maybe they're smart enough, figured, well, we're going to wait till after the murder happens, then we're going to call up and have the movers do it. I think they came like a month later, is what I heard, a month after the murder date. So thanks, Marines. Thanks for praying also for the boys, and I'll donate that. Thank you. But yeah, I ask for no money on this channel, so I just tell folks, keep your money. And I appreciate the kind gesture, but really, I don't need to. I think it just interferes with questioning and all that kind of stuff to put, people put money on there, then they have a question. So Marine doesn't have a question here, but anyway, that's just a nice gesture for you. But yeah, please, really, I don't. That's not necessary. I just like to just cover the questions and not have money get in the way. Irene is asking, let's say the Geek Squad person is available, can his interview from law enforcement not be used? No, it cannot be used. You have to testify. You can't just stick a police file into evidence and expect all that evidence to be admitted. You have to build foundation and have a right to cross-examine the witnesses and stuff like that. So no, that's and that's it goes also the issue of, like, if witnesses become unavailable, the longer you wait to get these trials together, you're going to replicate them all. I mean, think about it. There's going to be so much replication. Donna would have been convicted. And so it makes no sense to wait this long. It's just really ridiculous. Dreamscape is saying, do you think of using demonstratives and closing is an effective strategy as long as it's a weird jigsaw one? Yeah, it very much can be, especially if you have so much detailed minutia of evidence and all these texts and calls and the timeline of the calls, who called who when, and the way they had all the different arrows of who called another one first, and like, for example, the day of the hit,
All that kind of stuff is very critical and compelling to present to a jury. So if you have those kind of demonstratives to bring out during the testimony of the witness, as well as bring it out in your closing like they did, it's just a phenomenal, great thing to help sell the jury and have them package all that kind of stuff in their mind before they go deliberate. No, I don't have any cases I prosecuted that there's a videotape on. Sorry. Glenda K saying, do you think the prosecution hesitates to prosecute more than one at a time after Katie's hung jury? I think so. That could have been the deciding factor. It's like, well, we got to go one at a time, and what's the use if there could be a hung jury and all that. But I think especially family members, it's just so important because they're all involved in it. Just try them all at the same time, and you would just get it over and done with at that point, and you would have convictions on all of them. So I don't understand that. And if you do have to retry one of them, let's say, because it's a hung jury, then fine, just do that one. But I just think the evidence is strong enough. You should go after all of them at one fell swoop. All right, Carolyn, that's thank you, but not necessary. Las Vegas is saying if defense counsel didn't believe the unbelievable extortion story, don't they have an ethical obligation not to use that defense, or they have to believe it and use it because Charlie or Donna said so? You got to take the word of your client. Like I've had a client I'm thinking of right now that would not tell me the truth, that was involved in a crime, and I kept on digging, trying to find information out and whatnot. And so if as long as they tell me they're not involved in it, then and they go forward and they testify that they were not involved in it, then I guess got to go with what they tell me. And even if the evidence looks like it's overwhelmingly like they're guilty, you still go with that. But the other option is you could try to talk them into pleading guilty, because that's you could tell them, look, you're going to be found guilty of this, and so do you want to cut a deal and get a lower sentence, a lighter sentence, by cooperating with the government? They'll knock some of the charges off, and I'll get a better deal for you if you want me to do that, but you'll have to admit to the guilt if they don't accept offered pleas. An offered plea is like a no contest. You stipulate there's enough evidence to find you guilty, but you don't have to actually admit that you did it. States like Texas have that. Other states like Iowa do not have that. There's no offered plea in Iowa. So, but you could just stipulate to the minutes of testimony in Iowa, which is sort of like the same thing, but they don't call it an offered plea there. Terry B saying Donna needed a reason to call Wendi. They set up the whole TV nonsense that way. Yeah, I mean, they're talking forth and back beyond that. So I think that's, yeah, I think in their mind, we got to have a reason to call there, and we got to have some reason that Wendi was tied up from 8 to 12, but then the guy shows up at 8:20, so she tried to string him along till 9 o'clock. $55 Chevy's asking if I'm collecting funds and donating to a cause. So my last live, I said that the funds were donated were going to the Brightigans and their efforts to secure visitation, sort of like the Markells denied visitation for the kids. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and donate that money from tonight. I'll keep track and donate the full amount. I don't know what, I know YouTube's going to take some cut out of it, so I'll just add that. I'll add that to my contribution. Andy Logan's asking who took the picture of the beach with Katie, Wendi, and Katie's friend. I have a feeling that's a link to a bigger picture. Your take. Not sure if it's a bigger picture or not, but I have heard thoughts that seem to make sense. Is why are they so close? If they met like the first time, why are they both on the beach and like shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, arm to arm kind of thing? It looks like they're too chummy with each other. So yeah, that could be very well the case.
Nancy Clue is asking, what about just failure to call the police when Wendi Adelson disclosed the hitman stuff? Well, I think it was it was a year previous, so I think that, person would have thought, well, there's obviously no intent to do it if it was a year ago and then it fizzled out, whatever. So I think a lot of people think that, oh, well, I would have done something different. But in reality, that's not that he acted the way virtually most all people would act, especially if you're in a total love relationship with the person and then they're talking in confidence. And would have trusted her to say, well, I think he's going to do it. Right. He's probably thinking when he's going to say that, even though he had those issues with how she wasn't reliable. So it was really odd at the time, I'm sure, but I think it probably wasn't the only thing she said that really stuck out and is sort of like a weird thing to say. And so he just sort of like ignored it and went on to something else because it wasn't like an active. Now, if she would have said something like, hey, he's looking to hire a hitman right now, then obviously would have acted differently on that. But it's like a stale old threat or action of Charlie's. So I think it was not taken as a serious current issue. Timothy Squires asking if I read Wendy's book, and if so, are there many similarities to real facts? Yeah, there are a number of facts that are similar to that. I think that it just looked totally like she's writing it as much as she despises the husband. So in the book, that there's just the mockery of the husband despising him, and they're in the middle of nowhere, off the grid, civilization kind of stuff, and all these undertones of this seething hatred of Tallahassee and the husband's not a husband, just married him because they thought they're gonna fall out of love eventually anyway. So who cares about having love? I mean, he's just really a lot of jabs, and also talking about, there was a comment about some kind of play, some Chicago play where the husband got murdered and stuff like that. So it's really creepy. They could have brought out more of those details like that. So I've skimmed through the book. And so those are the ones I remember off the top of my head. But yeah, those are definitely some things to bring out in trial, more than what they brought out this last time. Definitely they should have brought out more, could have brought out more. But like I say, it was a slam dunk, overwhelming case against Charlie. So yeah, definitely bring that out, more details like that in the upcoming trials. Thank you. Harold is asking, subpoena for records to go 2 years prior to murder apply to all Adelsons accused? Well, some of these subpoena records, they're going back to 2012, so they can ask for going back as far as they want and think it's necessary. But in this particular case, they don't have, they're probably not going to have records going back that far. It remains to be seen. But MZ's asking, to what extent can a lawyer just point out the witness's demeanor because one does demeanor? Because Wendi, I think he's saying Wendy's demeanor was completely sociopathic. Would that have been met with objections immediately? Okay, as a prosecutor, we don't get into the mental statuses of witnesses. You can comment that it was weird. You can talk about that they lied, that the way she couldn't, different facial movements she made, the way she closed her eyes, all these different body reactions that indicated she was lying, squeezing her eyes closed for a while after the questions asked, and a lot of stuff like that you could see on Wendi that was really obvious. So yeah, please don't use all caps. Highmind is concussions asking, did Harvey clear his work schedule before they hit? I don't know if they looked at that. That's not come up before. I don't think Harvey exactly worked full time at that point anyway. I think he worked most days of the week, but I think he had some days he had off, trying to sort of wind down his practice a bit. Rosemary Romero's asking, do I think the biggest evidence against Wendi is the hitman comment that she made to Jeff Lacasse about her brother looking at hiring a hitman? Wendi never mentioned it in the police interview. Yeah, she denied that. And she denied it in court as well. And I think that
is one of the biggest pieces of evidence. That granted, she's implicating her brother in that, but the fact she mentioned it to Jeff Lacasse a few days before her ex gets murdered, that's just such a high coincidence. It's definitely a creep factor that indicates consciousness of guilt about some impending murder effort against Dan Markell. So I think that that's one of the best ones. The best one though is her going to Trescott and then her not asking about the kids to the police and trying to run up to the house saying, how are my kids doing? How are my kids doing? I haven't heard if they made it to school, to their daycare that day. So those are the two biggest things right there. But yeah, that's up there. That's probably part of the top 10. Can a high profile trial attorney have a lisp? Well, I have really dry lips right now, and so I can somehow my words don't come out right at times. So ADHD mind randomly inquiries. I mean, that it makes it harder on one hand for in this kind of format if you have attention deficit, but for trials where you can all super focus, you don't have questions coming out of every which way pertaining to the case, and having to do a live format. Keep in mind I'm on a camera and I don't have any body language to read on any of the witnesses. You guys as not witnesses, but you guys as try to gauge my responses to and whatnot. So I'm just trying to do the best I can to how you guys would perceive what I'm saying, not trying to belabor points too much and just trying to get to the right level of detail though. So ones that have a lisp, I'd say if you have a lisp per se, then I would say that's probably hard to be someone. If it's going to irritate the jury like that, then that can be bothersome. I know somebody in my last live said I needed to go to get speech therapy help. So, um, okay, 55 Chevy, I'll pass it on. Thanks for the cause. Katrina's asking how many people are working behind the scenes in George's office, say for Charlie or Donna's trial. I don't think there's that many. I mean, if you notice how many people came out for the trial after it was over, there was like the leadership and then just the two prosecutors. And I don't remember seeing anybody else because I was there after the verdict was announced with John and many other people that followed the case. And, there wasn't a whole team. If you look at the Murdo case, so I mean, there was they stood outside the courthouse. There were so many. So they had a team of 50 helping out on that case. So they're very much more bare bones support level of effort there in Tallahassee. Vicky Davenport, I totally agree with you. She says, I don't understand why they didn't try Charlie and Don at the same time, exact same evidence against each other. It seems like a waste to have two trials. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more than that. I mean, there's so much mirrored and all this evidence ties directly to both of them so perfectly because they're both involved in all these conversations. So when he's not in all the conversations, you need another day and a half or two of evidence directly tying her to it. But this one here, I want to attempt to answer your, say your name, DTech. Is there any possibility that Wendi really doesn't know about it and that it was all a weird coincidence to her driving by? You're obviously new to the case. I've never seen Mädchen, so that's German. Yeah, apparently you're in Germany. No, just go look at the indicators of Wendy's involvement on this channel, and you can see a lot of stuff out there. There's even more stuff, a lot more stuff I'm going to be bringing out here in the coming months. So that's not a possibility. Guarantee you from what I've seen, that's not a possibility. Irene is asking, did Rashbaum end his interview tour? Sarcasm. I only saw him on that one channel. I haven't heard of him being on any other channel. So yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe he realized it went over so bad. He better lay low and just prepare for trial.
Crime Prano's asking, was the Geek Squad appointment ever rescheduled as they went out there once before to kill him and then went home? Was the Geek Squad scheduled for the first time too? No, because the TV was broke after the first hit attempt in July. So that's why that would not be the case. I think it happened like about 10 days after that weekend. Hmm. Oops. So here from JW at Mayfield, what about Wendy's trying to frame Jeff LaCassa makes her look very guilty? Yeah, but why would you sit there and date somebody that you obviously have no interest in, and you're trying to get to Miami and you're trying to have a serious love connection with a guy that is not going to move and is happy there in Tallahassee, and she wants a flashy South Beach rich kind of guy, and that's not what he was. He's completely not the kind of guy you'd see her pursuing. And so, why would you do that for 8 months? It definitely was because she was involved, and that's what Georgia argued in court, is that that he got framed during that time frame. So, but so definitely that's a strong indicator. Rosemary's asking, can Harvey use Rashman as a lawyer when he gets indicted? Yeah, I mean, you may see that, but maybe they'll also realize that, gosh, it's like, okay, he's 0 for 2. Do we really want to try for 0 for 3? Hey, one of the things to keep in mind is, I've mentioned this before, how Wendi is being a lawyer. If she says she was part of Donna's team, she could go see her mom. She'd have that right to go see her mom, even though she's an undiagnosed co-conspirator. She would be able to go see her mom up there in the Leon County Jail, but she's not going to go see her mom. And she would also be able to go see, potentially, maybe we'll go see her brother as well, but she's not going to sit anywhere near up in northern Florida. She wants to stay away from there because she'd be worried about her getting arrested. So, yeah, almost on an hour here, so I'm going to wind it up here pretty soon. My mouth is pretty dry. MC's asking, do I think this case will result in any kind of precedence regarding conflict of interest? I don't think there's any precedence. I think it's well established, the rules. I think it's just that folks don't understand the significance of this, and clients don't understand the significance and whatnot. So, T.S. Jackson is asking, do I think the prosecutor should use the phone call disparaging the jury in Charlie's trial? I don't think they're going to use that. I really don't. I know that was very, very revealing and insightful to see what their state of mind was, but I don't think really any of that will be brought up. Maybe just the flight escape from Donna, that conversation. And they may take out the part about Dan Roshbaum was the one that, she had a conversation with, or else they won't even need it. They'll just show that she was taken off for the airport. So, hmm. MM is asking, how can Wendy be so stoic on the stand as a witness after not seeing her brother for over a year in jail? Yeah, I mean, it was like real cold as ice. All right, I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. So thanks for supporting the Just for Markel efforts, and this is a case that should have way more attention To true crime followers, sorry about that. I hit the wrong button over here in the right margin. And so I hope it continues to gain traction with the national news media. There's so many details of this case, the national news media, the 2020, the Datelines missed. So I really hope that, this will bring a lot more attention. I think also the Brightigan case, being so many similarities, I think there'll be a lot of comparisons with that. And that's why I'm going to continue to cover the Brightigan case as well as time goes on here. So I'm going to be picking up speed and be studying that more. So thank you guys. And I'll plan to be here again next Sunday. So thank you again. Have a good night and a good day wherever you're at.